Good afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about corn ethanol. Corn ethanol is a pretty hot topic, has been for several years actually, with all the debate going on in the media, etc. I'll explain a little bit what corn ethanol actually is. Corn ethanol is basically a 180 proof ethyl alcohol, or grain ethanol, or grain alcohol, pardon me, that's made by fermenting the starch and sugars in the corn kernels and removing all the water. To make it, they grind the corn up really fine. They add a whole bunch of water. They then make kind of a mash or a slurry. They then cook it and ferment it using yeast to turn the starches into sugars and then the sugars into alcohol. They then have to distill it about 4 times to purify it to about 99.5% pure alcohol. They also denature it or poison it by adding something like wood alcohol, methyl alcohol, to prevent people from drinking it, basically. A little bit of history on corn ethanol. As Arindam Banerjee, who is a consultant for the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, published in a study that he found that even though in the last several years the biofuel industry has been pushed a lot by environmental awareness and carbon emissions, the actual ethanol boom dated back to 1970s when Brazil came out with its with an incentive plan for sugarcane-based ethanol to replace the petroleum-based gasoline that they were using at that time. The United States then came out with the 1970 Energy Act, which basically subsidized the development of corn-based ethanol. During the 70s and 80s, the oil shock kind of further drove the push for more independence from the crude oil that had gotten the U.S. into the bind that they were in. At the same time, ethanol production costs decreased due to more efficiency in production, higher yield per bushel of corn, lower input energy costs, production streamlining. And then in the 1990s, throughout that period, ethanol production grew by 60%. After that, during like 2000 to present, the continuing increase in gasoline prices have, for the most part, increased production fairly steadily over the last few years. Despite the rapid expansion of this industry over the last 30-40 years, there's a lot of people who are still skeptical. A lot of scientists, environmentalists, of course, economists are quite skeptical that corn ethanol is actually helping us as economically or environmentally, etc. Those in favor of ethanol say that the higher energy costs and other of gasoline and other fossil fuels actually do put ethanol in a position to really help the U.S. industry. They credit the efficiency of ethanol as producing less emissions, a less expensive fuel, and also a benefit to the rural communities that often are around the production centers for ethanol. As Bob Stallman, who is the president of the American Farm Bureau, states, ethanol is a good, clean, homegrown fuel that lessens U.S. reliance on foreign fuel while adding jobs to the American economy. However, opponents of corn-based fuel say that corn is such an inefficient use of energy that using the whole U.S. Corn crop for ethanol would only reduce gasoline consumption by 12%. Different research done by scientists, etc., say that the use of fossil fuel energy to produce ethanol only contributes a small percentage of transportation fuels. They also say that a lot of energy is required to produce ethanol in the form of labor, machinery, fuels, and fertilizers to grow the corn, and also to convert corn into ethanol, electricity, coal, natural gas, as a lot of the plants use. As another industry oil industry engineer said, corn ethanol is essentially a way to recycle natural gas. However, the main purpose of biofuels is to reduce our dependence on petroleum-based fuels. So I think our biggest thing is our biggest problem is to simply figure out what is actually helping and what is actually hindering us as a nation. Whether corn ethanol is good for us or bad, I think still remains to be seen in many ways. But we do really need to take a close look at all the different biofuel sources that we're trying to use, and figure out which one is actually going to help us as a nation.